Hello, welcome to Wing Chun Workout, bringing you content on exercises for Wing Chun. In this video, we'll do a discussion, passing on some Wing Chun wisdom. In particular, we'll cover some skill questions, like tips and hacks to help you achieve your Wing Chun skills so you can reach your goals in training. Now, I'm going to bring in the guest, Sifu Paul Wang. He is one of my teachers and very influential in my Wing Chun path. The reason for the discussion is to get a perspective from a skilled practitioner and teacher and gain insights from their experience. And also, we might bring clarity on popular Wing Chun topics and sayings and how Wing Chun applies to the general world. Hello, Sifu Paul. How are you?
Thanks for the introduction. I'm touched, especially the part you said influential on your path. In Chinese we say the Tao, the path, your story of mastery. And so even calling me Sifu, it's not just the title to me. And of course, it took a long time to reach this sort of acknowledgement from our lineage. And so I take it as a responsibility. So even for those out there who are viewing or listening who've never met me, I thank you for your interest and to connect to our flow here and see what interesting insights and meanings we can share.
Great, thanks for that. Now, I know you're a man of many talents. So if you don't mind, can you just introduce yourself and just give a brief summary of your Wing Chun or martial arts experience and anything of note that's relevant to this discussion?
Yeah, thank you again for the acknowledgement. And maybe this video we can just exchange compliments. No. But yeah, it's very meaningful to me, this question. It's about identity, it's about experience, and it's about my passion. So when I was in university, I went to University of California in Berkeley, and I was a freshman, and I was studying. My major was integrative biology with the emphasis on human biodynamics and locomotion. So basically the study of movement of the human animal, or humanimal, as I like to say. And a dorm mate of mine said, "Hey, come check out this workshop from a visiting teacher in town who was teaching martial arts. He was into martial arts, and of course Bruce Lee, etc. Right, this kind of culture." And at first I'm like, I don't like fighting, and later on we can discuss the difference between a fighter and a warrior, this kind of maybe difference in just this kind of training as an act or as a doing versus like it affecting your identity, your being, or even as a life way, a lifestyle. Eventually it became the latter for me. It's been internalized, the philosophies and the principles of the martial path. And so back to the story, I was convinced to go, and I was blown away because everything that I saw was everything that I studied academically, theoretically. Of course, we were doing some experiments like on insects and robotics, but in terms of especially the human form, in the context of a very stressful situation, right, which is primal in our kind of species DNA, conflict, combat, that the instructor was able to demonstrate the awareness, the balance, the coordination, ABC of efficacious and efficient martial motion against the opponent. So within a couple seconds at most, every attack, of course, simulated as a demonstration, don't really want to hurt each other, was just amazing. And so that kind of lit the spark within me as to the beginning of my encounter with martial arts. And if I go back a little bit, one little episode, it was after I began teaching, that maybe a few years in, that I had a new student come in that felt very familiar to me. Of course, never met this student, and she was a very, even though first timer, very intent. I could see the passion, I could see the meaning behind the intention of the movement. And then after the class, I talked to her, say, "Oh, what brought you into class? How did you hear about us?" Those general kind of marketing questions. Maybe it's a flyer or something. So she shared, and then why did you come in? Not just what mode of the advertisement. So she said that she was attacked, um, and immediately it hit my heart. I was like, whoa! I even got emotional and maybe even a bit teary eyed. And she noticed. She's like, "Are you okay?" I'm like, "Yeah." It's just I didn't know why at the moment, but I was really affected by her presence and her intention to come and learn to protect herself. And so it was afterwards where I meditated on it. It wasn't right away that I realized actually what that was. So of course I have this academic, more kind of biological interest of the human body. That's kind of the biological context. I was been fascinated about the human body and its just miracle of functions ever since I was younger too, in the library, reading psychology, philosophy, anthropology, medicine, and I remember the first book that I asked my mom to buy me ever was Arnold Schwarzenegger's Encyclopedia of Bodybuilding, because I'm like, wow, like this deep understanding of theory, anatomy, and physiology, you can train, right? And have these results. I never became a bodybuilder, but it's just that transformation, that sort of alchemy that really impressed me. And then I have the sociological context, which is the story of this young lady who came in, connected to my own personal story. When I was living in Taiwan, this is like middle school, that kind of first sort of sweet puppy love, maybe sixth grade, seventh grade, and so there was this girl. Of course, I was just a boy. So this kind of first kind of girlfriend, first romantic feeling. And long story short, I lost contact. And I didn't know why until I heard from her friends that she was attacked, and I won't give all the details of the situation. And then that was our breakup, right? And she was sent to another country actually because of this whole situation. And so that's like my first heartbreak in that context. And I felt perhaps guilty, even though I wasn't at fault. But I think that was a trauma such that I felt like I wasn't there to protect her. So decade at least later, that feeling was still there. And so there's many other details to different threads, but I can just summarize. Yeah, I've always been fascinated by the biological aspect, and saw the application of it within a self-defense, self-protection context. Why was that impressive to me? Not just because of the aesthetics or the uh, um, the power of the movement, technique, and speed as well. Uh, it was personally meaningful because, and especially why I started to teach, because I wanted to uh, teach people to protect themselves when no one else could be there for them. So those are a couple threads I could share for now.
Yeah, thanks for sharing. Yeah, it's pretty interesting that people, they come into martial arts for different reasons.
Yeah.
I mean, I've taught several people myself, and some people like to get into it for fitness. Some people for self-defense, like you mentioned,
Yeah.
or maybe just community, or some
Mm.
people like to discover themselves, maybe discover their manhood or womanhood, something like that.
Warriorhood, right?
Warriorhood, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I like that. When I was teaching, and I realized this September 2022, where we're in recording this, is exactly my 25th year anniversary. I began September 1997, I think, to start teach. So I was like, wow, quarter century, right? You think of it when you're younger, like, okay, that sounds like a lot, or it's just the old timers that say that. But here I am, and I came up with the 5 A's. I don't know if I want to share that now. Perhaps we can use that as a frame. And it ties into what you said, the 5 A's of martial activity. And these are kind of whys, but this might be interesting since this is kind of our first discussion in this format, to map out why people train. And maybe the viewer already trains something general or specific in terms of style or lineage, or you're kind of at the cusp. You heard about it, you heard about some of the benefits, like you said, fitness or community, focus, confidence, right? And so if you're on the edge, maybe this conversation can kind of encourage you to start something. And of course, we each have our own biases. I have mine, and seeing Aaron as well. But I would say any martial training, is can be useful. Of course, teacher and school is, and style are kind of considerations. So the 5 A's of martial activity, the first one is martial athletics. So by that, I mean combat sport. And I bring this up first because it's probably kind of first to mind in most people's conception of martial arts. So the competition, even the competitive spirit, the idea of testing yourself, right? You talked about perhaps the warriorhood, right? Regardless of whatever your gender is, like to test yourself, you want to see how you stack up. And so, of course, the modern mega bucks, I don't know how much, industry around this is, we know MMA, right? But also, there's also like more amateur kind of organizations around this, like the like boxing or all the martial forms in the Olympics. These are all martial athletics. The second A is I call martial acrobatics. So these are people who maybe they're into dance. Actually, I've seen some amazing dancers who also that ability, that aesthetic, that artistic nature transfers well to martial acrobatics, doing flips. So making it look good, even entertaining, right? Even with music and things like that. And so you see this in the movies, right? And obviously it should look good, right? And of course the movie has evolved, right? From the 80s, 90s to now, not just the CGI, but also I think in the past, it's actually more just the acrobatics. So these aren't either or categories, but I think the martial aesthetic now is maybe more realistic, or maybe not, I don't know. But the third A is martial, I call it aerobics. So this is kind of the fitness type, like you mentioned, for your agility, for your health, especially physical health, your cardiovascular, respiratory health, and your neurological coordination, even a bit of de-stressing, right? And so so these are kind of like where you go to the gym, and then often they call it a kickboxing class, right? And not that kickboxing can't be within another category of the martial A's, but I would say in general, right? In that kind of context where you're going to gym, it's more for the aerobics. And then the fourth A is, I call it martial actuality. So this is like real self-defense, practical techniques, no fluff, no rules. Of course, you train in a safe way, ideally, right? But the idea is that, in this context, you don't train with the idea of necessarily going into competition. Actually, you want to avoid martial situations, paradoxically. And so you train with the idea that this should work. This will, I hope, right, work in a real situation where there's an emergency, where you need to protect life and limb or others, right? And so there's a surprise element, right? You don't wear uniforms, a weapon could be pulled out, multiple attackers, 50% heavier than you, could be the opponent, right? And so, there's different styles like that. So there's like, a lot of people know like Krav Maga and maybe even TFT. So so those are examples of the fourth. And then the fifth A, I call it martial alchemy. So this is like spiritual transformation, more meditation, spirituality, maybe even the philosophy, even the tradition. So connecting to something greater than yourself. Maybe community can fit in here, or maybe that's kind of within all of them. And so some examples are like, more the internal martial arts, whether it's like Aikido or Tai Chi Chuan, from the Eastern traditions. or even like Shaolin, right? You know, the monks, right? It's actually, that's a really good example of martial alchemy. You don't just learn to, you know, to break bricks or to beat up people. It's also overcoming yourself, right? So uh, so I mentioned that because I think it's a good frame for this initial conversation. Maybe we can refer back to it or not. So
Let's cover some skill questions in particular. Since Wing Chun Workout is a library of solo exercise routines for building coordination and fitness, most martial artists, they put a lot of emphasis on partner training. But as you know, that's just part of the training. Can you give your thoughts on what the benefits are for solo training, if
yeah,
you should solo train?
yeah. This is great. We know each other so long, so it's like it's such a pleasure to have this kind of conversation with you for more the general and also for your circle and community. So um, yeah, Wing Chun workout. So again, these 5 A's, no one teacher, no one school is just one. Everything is a mix. And so even the term martial workout, so that's a bit perhaps more the aerobic, the fitness part, right? But of course, you mentioned Wing Chun, which is a particular style and history and development and focus. So um, perhaps there's even some of that alchemy, right, to change yourself for the better. And even we can get even into the specific name Wing Chun, which I have a certain interpretation for, which is a meme and a principle that I use in my own training. So again, if I could offer another context or map, it's sort of a quadrant matrix of 2 by 2. So on the top, you could say solo, right, and partner. You mentioned those terms, solo, partner, types of practice by yourself or with others. And then on the vertical axis, we could say more form or formal or sequenced or protocol, right? Set. But I use the word form to describe that as a keyword. And then function, form and function. This is kind of a biological thing where you say form informs function, right? And you can also maybe, like if you're looking at dinosaur bones archaeologically, try to determine the function by the form, right? And so by function, I mean application. I mean more towards like what I said for the A of martial actuality, that form sometimes is more theoretical, or it's more for the internal alchemy, changing, breathing, you know, the spiritual aspects, training your mind. And it doesn't necessarily translate into martial actuality. And so the test, if you will, is kind of the functional aspect. Can we walk the walk? Can this theory be put into practice? So you have therefore solo form, right? You have partner form, you have solo function and partner function. Okay, so I would say a complete program. And again, maybe you're not looking for a complete program, you're just looking for one aspect, covers all 4 of these. Yeah. But of course, we can emphasize, you know, 1, 2, 3, 4. And from your question, if we go back to that after I kind of zoomed out, is this perhaps the solo function, actually. So solo forms are ones that are inherited, almost like a song, right? Whatever, happy birthday, right? Then in different cultures has evolved, obviously, to different language. You have that in Chinese, you have that in Spanish, you have that in Greek. Maybe the melody changes too, I don't know, in some countries. So but it's inherited, and it's the melody, right, is more or less dun 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 dun, right? It's not like dun 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 dun, right? Then it's like not that song anymore. So every, I think, traditional, let's just say, martial art, meaning a martial art with a certain intergenerational lineage, has developed these songs. And so I call those solo forms. And those are important because they give you a vocabulary. They're like an alphabet, to use another metaphor. I use a music metaphor and then linguistic metaphor. They're like an alphabet. Everyone has to learn A, and then followed by B, followed by C, all the way to Z, right? So you have these 26 letter sequence. Can you train it like C, X, M, T, right? I guess, but it's not so useful, right? If you're trying to work within a certain context, right? Maybe in a different culture or a different planet or metaverse or multiverse, right? They do the alphabet like C, Y, X. You're like, wow, right? But that's contextual. And so if we stay with that, so within the context of a school or a style or a training priority, one of the 5 A's, right? We need some things that are predictable, that are set like grammatical rules or spelling rules, etc., alphabetical order, right? Otherwise, it's chaos. You don't have any way to um, filter and map out reality. You got to start somewhere. A, B, C, 1, 2, 3. Now, what I said about mixing up the letters is actually now relevant. Is actually perfect and good to train in the solo function quadrant. Solo form, no, don't change it. Maybe after you become a grandmaster and you've taught thousands of students or whatever, students who are also masters, and then maybe amongst some senior students, you can discuss. You know what, like this we inherited from the last grandmaster. I always wondered about that. I always felt like it would work better, with you know ACB rather than ABC. So, by the authority of the lineage, I change it, and that's how styles evolve, right? And so some practitioners are more fundamentalist in the sense of traditionalists. They try to, no, that's not allowed. You got to keep everything like the late grandmaster and etc. generations did, right? Not allowed to change it, right? And that's cool, right? That creates fidelity and tradition. And then you have some practitioners who are more innovative, right? They're more progressive, not as conservative. So this kind of personality trait, right, plays out in politics, plays out in academia, plays out even in martial culture. And so the more progressive ones, like, don't mind changing things, right? They're not stuck to tradition. And it's good and bad. I would say I'm not judging either one as good or bad per se. They both have pro and con, right? Innovation is good, but are you going to try to reinvent the wheel before you understand what a wheel is, or see how other people, you know, uh, wheel? I would say it's better if you understand the tradition and then perhaps, shift it based on your own creativity. Now, the previous conservatism without progress, right, or tradition without innovation becomes stale. It can rot, right? It can, and like you see, even in the martial arts, right? We developed over the decades, hopefully, right? That we're not doing martial arts in the same way that Bruce Lee was, right? Or that his teacher, right, Yip Man was, etc. Right? Um, and not to say new and future is better, or old school OG tradition is worse, right? In some way, maybe if you go back far enough to like the Neanderthal versus the the Homo sapien age, right? They also did martial arts too, right? And so maybe it was more primal, more real, without all these kind of CGI, kind of fantasies, etc. Right? So solo function is where you take the alphabet, just to keep that alphabet metaphor, spelling, and change the sequence, right? So A through Z, that sequence. And everyone learns A through Z in a particular school lineage. But what's cool, even now, after 25 years, like, let's say technique ABC, right? Let's just say that. First 3 techniques of the first form. No one, maybe in the history of the lineage, has ever done CAB, right? I never taught it. I never learned it. My teacher never mentioned it. Maybe someone did, but let's just say theoretically, no one did in 10 generations rearranged ABC to CAB. Wow, right? That's very innovative. And of course, the test then is, does that make sense, right? ABC obviously, let's say, makes sense within a certain style. But let's see, how come no one ever did C first and then A and then B? And so those are the kind of things you discover in solo function. It's part of the creative process. It's part of developing that innovative spirit, part of putting yourself into the art, not just receiving the art. So I think it's very important to become, let's just say, a creative or a sovereign, even become your own kind of warrior, and not just again, with a little bit negative connotation, just parrot or just mimic what you received. Right? And so I think it's a very important aspect of cultivation, martial cultivation.
So based off of what you just said, would you think the progression might be for, like, let's say if someone is having trouble, I've had several students that said, what can I do to train at home
Yeah.
to get better in class, right? To improve their performance.
Yeah.
Most times I say, just do what I told you in class and repeat that.
Yeah.
But they're not creative enough.
Yeah.
So I would
Good
say
question.
they need some guidance. So you
Yeah.
would say start off with, like, let's say the form, and
Yeah.
then progress with a certain pattern,
Yeah.
and then build up to, let's say, shadow boxing. Or what are your thoughts on
Yeah.
that?
This is such a great discussion. Like, we could have many episodes just on this. So my mind is going in different directions. One is that, okay, obviously solo practice at home, assuming you're alone, you can't train with your grandma, or you don't have training partners. Okay, you're on some island, right? And you learn via Zoom. Okay, so you're really alone. And then everything is solo. But of course, then actually I've had half jokingly said train with the trees. Or if you have an animal, train with the animal, because when it comes at you, you can move it aside. So so you can get, that's even creative too, right? And so I do think it's important to have traditional forms. And some styles are like, forget that. We don't need, tradition is kind of a cage, right? And so, I'm all about freedom and innovation. So that's cool. I think it's a good basis. It's like classical music, and then like modern music, or like classical training in dance, right? And then you do modern dance, right? So it's not an either or thing. And at this point, even modern dance, right, has a tradition too, right? Like if you go to modern dance school, they're like, okay, everyone do this, because Martha Graham started that, decades ago. And then, for any system, and I do calligraphy too. So when I'm doing Chinese calligraphy, I mimic the masters, right? And there's like, you can't finish it. There's like, several thousand years of history there. But it's important to construct something. It's like a hypothesis. Set up something first. Otherwise, like if you have a new person come and just say, move, just train. You're like, they don't have the vocabulary. They don't have the alphabet, let alone vocabulary, let alone the grammar, right? Language is like that. You have alphabet, and then you have spelling, which creates words, spelling rules, which create words. And then you have grammar rules, which then show you how to organize those words, right? And then etc. Then you have eventually to poetry, right? And eventually to spontaneous spoken word poetry, right? That's just like you're not reading from anything, kind of like now. I'm not reading from anything, but it's just coming out as you. And so that creative part is, where you break limits, right? Is by definition having limits, set up limits first, right? So it's like hypothesis and then antithesis, right? Break down, set up and then break down. Or it's like construct and then destruct, construction, deconstruction, right? And the third stage is then in the hypothesis antithesis model, it's synthesis, then rebuilding, right? Or destruct, or first construct, build up, learn, and then destruct, break it down. Don't assume, right? Make it your own. I love to say that. Maybe that's perhaps step 3, which is then restruct. I came up with that word. Basically reconstruct, right? Construct, destruct, restruct. And so it's very natural for new students to be very motivated, let's assume, excited. Wow, they're starting something. And perhaps, they are learning a lot, right? And they feel like they go from 0, to 1. Wow, right? From nothing to something. And then from 1 to 2. Wow, that's a doubling. Right? So that they make these big jumps, right? And then little do they know how much is ahead, right? And so that can trigger like the Dunning-Kruger effect, right? So I think what I would encourage specifically if a student was asking that, and I have said, is like exactly you said, like I just taught you a solo form, right? I learned from my teacher. Just drill that, just train that, and again, this is kind of maybe like Karate Kid, wax on, wax off. And nowadays people are like, no, it's boring. I don't like this repetition of the same. Next thing, new, right? That's a problem for sure. But if you want to get good, there's no other way than to repeat until you get bored. And then you repeat more until you get bored, maybe 3 or 4 times. And then to overcome boredom, actually, that's part of the martial practice, the overcoming yourself, your limitations, and kind of being able to refocus after you get distracted. These are all very important. You talked about the context of why martial training is unique and special and transferable to our day-to-day. These are a couple examples. And then I think maybe in the beginning, you could draw from your own creative solo function flows. You inherited ABC, but you're like, okay, I don't want to give them E, F, G, H, right? That's like quantitative addition. And that can be too much. It's like they're just first month. You don't want to give them more stuff, right? So this is kind of teaching how to teach. So sometimes you say, oh, we want to give you more, right? And we overteach quantitatively. Oh, you can do this. And they're like, right? You lose them because of that. Because they thought it was cool and they're motivated, and you demotivated them by over teaching them quantitatively. My preference, at least 50-50, is qualitative addition, right? So you're not giving them more units, ABC, right? You keep ABC, but you're giving them more variation. So more connections, variations. You maybe do, like I said before, CAB or BAC or CBA, right? Or you just focus on ABA, or BCB, right? ACA, right? So all these variations can create more connectivity within the units of knowledge they already have. And maybe you give them for homework, or like say home play. Okay, I taught you technique ABC. Instead of me, right? If you want to generate their creativity, a lot of teachers kill the creativity of their students. I like to generate it. So for some people, it has to be given birth, right? Some people feel like they're not creative, right? But I think everyone is. So I like to nurture it. And one example is that, okay, I'm not going to tell you what to do, but I'll tell you what you can do for yourself, which is go home and see if you can find more combinations between A, B, and C. And then maybe they find one or none. And but with repeated practice with these kind of exercises, these opportunities that we create experientially for the student to contact their own creativity. You see a child, right, with 3 puzzle pieces or 3 blocks, like they can play with it for hours, right? And then over weeks. I don't know, maybe nowadays kids are different. So yeah, that's how I would answer that question. And here's one last thing, is the word action. So you have your intention, and then your emotion, and then your action, right? Your mental, emotional, and physical dynamic. And so ideally they align, right? And then you do a good action, right? Like boom, right? Now, solo training, right? Both solo form and solo function are within that action category. And the basis of that, the quality of that, the coordination, the connection, the grammar, the better you are at spelling and grammar, right? The better your own poetry, that will directly transfer, through a different kind of training, interactively with partners, right? So that's called interaction, right? And so, or reaction, right? Let's say that. So playing with that word, I sometimes say this to encourage students who are training online or whatever, like, oh, I don't have a training partner. Yeah, that kind of sucks. It would be ideal if, you had 10 people to train with in your village. But let's say the word action, 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 6 letters, right? And then reaction, which is partner training, RE. So total of 8 letters, right? In reaction, 6 of them are action. So to me, it's like 75% is on you, right? And 25% is kind of checking you, how you react to others, how they react to you. So I wouldn't say 50-50 actually. If I were questioned about that, I would say it's not 50-50. I would say actually it's more important to take responsibility for your own training. It's kind of like within this kind of self-care kind of frame, right? No one can go get a massage for you, right? No one can hydrate for you. No one can take the supplements for you. No one can levitate your ass off the couch and turn off Netflix for you and move your arms, right? To train, right? You got to do that. So even to show up to a gathering, right? Seminar, class, it's you. So I would say at least 70% is solo, right? Of course, if you have a community where it's a partnering with, badass soloists, of course, that's ideal, right? Um, and so, yeah, I don't know if that answers your question, but some thoughts.
Yeah, it does. Also, I was thinking about there are different types of training. Like, for example, you can train for coordination, right? Just to get your fluidity. You can train for power, maybe
Yeah.
doing the 1-inch punch, trying that out. Or you can train for endurance,
Yeah.
or even the arms training, right? For just for toughening, maybe
Conditioning. Yeah.
yeah, conditioning, maybe hitting the bag for
Yeah.
hours. In your opinion, what would be, and also speed, right?
Yeah.
Speed as well. So, but there's probably too many to too much to train or to count. But
Yeah.
in your opinion, what's gives you the best bang for your buck, or where should you start? Like, what's the
Yeah.
hierarchy?
Well, I'm not sure if there's a hierarchy per se. Maybe if there is at the top of the hierarchy within the martial A of martial actuality, right? If that's your right, the hierarchy, the pyramid is different for each person, each school, right? And so let's say my bias is okay. Let me put martial actuality up there, which is functionality, right? So lower on, maybe at the yeah, and we can rank those 5 A's, right? Maybe at the bottom is the acrobatic part, the aesthetics. I don't care really what it looks like per se in terms of like floweriness or elaboration. Again, all good. I love dance, right? Dance has a lot of movements which are unnecessary or even dangerous, right? In a self-defense situation, martial dance, right? More the art of martial art. So maybe I would put that on the bottom, at least, right? Maybe for this phase of my training. Maybe if I'm hired right, to be a fight choreographer, then that would be at the top, right? So it's good in a way that we introduce that 5A framework, because then you can decide on your own hierarchy, how would you order those 5 from 1 to 5 in terms of importance. Let me just use martial actuality as the top of the hierarchy for now. Then obviously, right, I would need to develop, in this context, solo training, right, both solo form and solo function, that maximizes what I think is necessary for a real situation, right? And then you listed a whole bunch of variables. Let's say endurance, stamina. Is that a high value, within the hierarchy of martial reality, martial actuality as top, right? Do I think I need the ingredient, right? Now I'm cooking, okay? If I want to cook martial actuality, what should I throw in the pot? Is endurance a spice that I need? And you can think, not really, because I don't expect to have to, be in tip-top cardiovascular fitness, right? It's good, of course. Let's say it's pepper, but maybe that's not my first flavor to add in. Maybe you heard a statistic, maybe it's your bias that ideally, or in most real self-defense situations, they last 10 seconds, 30 seconds, right? A minute, I don't know, right? Whatever your information source is, before someone is knocked out or escapes, right? So do I need to be able to run, a 4-minute mile, or even like a, 50-second, sprint or whatever? No, maybe not. I will do it maybe, let's say, once a week, right, or twice a week, work more on the endurance aspect, or like repeating a technique like da 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 da. Do I have to be able to do that, 1,000 times in a row? Maybe not. But not only does that kind of endurance training, it seems like endurance training when we repeat something. And usually we think endurance in terms of stamina, like cardiovascular, running out of breath, right? I would say repetition for me is not so much for endurance training, because I don't expect to have to repeat a technique 100 times, even 10 times, right? That means in a way it's pretty low function, or the opponent is just scary, right? Like I already hit him, 5 times and he's still not, out of commission enough for me to get out of the way. Yeah. So then again, that's low function, right? If self-defense function is like let's define it. Maximum results, maximum impact, minimal time, right? Meaning ideally with one strike, right? That the person stops, right? Right. And that's like what, half a second, right? So anything more than that, then you have to question your training. Like, is it because I've been training too much breadth of techniques? I feel like I have to do, these 20 techniques equally, right? Versus focusing on the top 3 or 4 that are perhaps most practical. Yeah, maybe I have to edit my training, right? Now, so I'm just using endurance as an example, right? So maybe what's lacking is my power. So maybe I need to do some power training, right? And that could be supplemental, like doing push-ups or pull-ups or some calisthenics or lifting weights, right? It's just like my muscles are, my maximum strike, right? With my physiology is only, whatever, 100 pounds of force, and or 80 pounds of force, and that leaves something to be desired, right? My impact, right? Maximum impact per moment, you know okay, it's my muscular system that's lacking. And so I emphasize that, right? And or it's my sometimes power actually is not really power per se. Like, say you have big muscles, right? But maybe your impact is limited not by your musculature, but by your neural musculature, right? Meaning your nervous system, energy and coordination. Are you able to calm yourself, right? Calm your autonomic nervous system, right? Because if your nervous system is like in fight or flight, then it's not optimal to then coordinate, right? You lose fine motor control. Again, these things come up with adrenaline and such, right? So you do lose fine motor control. Maybe you need to focus more on your nervous system, calming yourself down, right? So doing maybe intensive training workout, but checking in with your interoception. How am I breathing, right? Am I still aware? Am I getting into tunnel vision? Am I losing my wits, right? So again, these are very self-defined. It depends on which of the 5 A's is your hierarchy, and even how you cook it, right? Which ingredient you think is most important for, let's say, your martial athletics or your martial acrobatics. Maybe stretching, right? For the acrobatics, like, I want to learn to do like a spinning kick 720, but my hips are tight, right? So maybe stretching should be your main kind of modality until you achieve that goal, which then can change, right? And so it's very flexible. So I guess, what we're kind of offering to people is kind of, the variables, and hopefully they can receive what we're offering and then cook up their own meal, so to speak, that's tasty for them, because what's good for me or you actually may be irrelevant for someone else.
Yeah, something that I do more nowadays is warming up or doing some type of mobility or flexibility, just for, as you get older or you've been training for a while, things get tight. So just doing that work just helps with longevity, so you can train as well. So I think that's very important.
Good one. Yeah, you see, longevity, right? I don't know, again, which category. Maybe that's part of the martial aerobics part, but not just like we think of aerobics, but in terms of like your cardiovascular, your musculoskeletal, your tendinomuscular, right? Even brain health, right? Because you think of aerobics, right? That's like, air, oxygen. So that has to, fill out the whole body. So longevity, yeah, it's pretty much up there for me too, right? Because some maybe martial artists, they're like, forget that. I just want my moment of glory, in my late teens or mid 20s, and then and then I can have the trophy. And then even in my, 60s, 70s, I can show the trophy. I can't do any of what I did before, but my grandkids maybe have some secondary pride on that. Yeah. And so longevity, sustainability maybe wasn't a priority. And that's fine, right? The knees are shot or whatever. A little bit of TBI, traumatic brain injury, but whatever, I had my glory days. But for me, and I think you shared, is like how to be able to train maybe, yeah, into our 80s, perhaps, right? If we were, blessed to live that long, or even more, right? 90s and 100, and you know, decades later, we can do another interview in the metaverse as disembodied consciousnesses. Yeah, just joking. Yeah. So
So
yeah,
speaking of longevity,
yeah,
because I come across people, especially newer students or practitioners, let's say, of anything,
yeah,
it could be martial arts or any sport, um, they overtrain, or
yeah,
they see like a training montage. Um, I once had a guy in class who I didn't tell this guy to do anything, but he wanted to train his conditioning. So he got a Makiwara board,
mhm,
put some rope on it, and started punching it. The next training session, he comes in and his knuckles are all like scabbed over. And
yeah,
I'm like, what did you do? He's like, well,
right,
I'm
right.
punching conditioning. So, do you have any guidance for people who have trouble with this, how to
Yeah,
uh, modulate their training so they don't
oh,
overtrain? And actually, how much should you be training? Like, should
yeah,
it be like an hour per session, 2 hours?
yeah. I love the word modulation. I'm thinking of the word culture and interoception, which I mentioned already. So part of that is cultural. Of course, we have self-responsibility, but I think in modern culture, like sooner, faster, kind of immediate gratification, like, wow, I want to be able to do that, that you see on TV, but maybe this is a trained athletes, and they've been training since they were 5, right? Or you see a movie and that's not even real, right? And you want to mimic that. And so that's cultural, right? And so in traditional cultures, let's say, like the models weren't like, uh, robots and, and CGI and fantasy. Um, the models were more like nature, right? And a tree or even an animal, right? And so we didn't feel this urgency, perhaps, right? Um, to to have instant results. That wasn't even part of our vocabulary of our cultural values, right? So that's the context of training. I think that's why it shows up in so many different realms. I've seen it too, right? Whether you're, like you heard meditation is good. So then you're like, oh, you read a book about it, or you read all the books about it. You go to like a 10-day retreat, and it's a silent retreat, meditating for 8 hours a day. And then you're like, yeah, I want to master meditation, right? And then, um, you develop a little bit of a cuckoo-ness, right? Around that, or even for meditation, like you develop, like a sore, or you bust your hips, like, so even not martial arts, like even just sitting still, right? Your spine, so,
Yeah.
and, like, and I won't name other things, that's kind of generic, but this shows up, right, with everything. So part of it is cultural. And so I think the subculture that I try to create is, again, longevity is good, and interoception, right? I mentioned that. So I think that's a really powerful tool. And again, like I said earlier, like this is a form of self-care. No one can do this for you. Your Sifu, your guru, the goddess, no guide can do this for you, which is self-care in the sense of, in this case, training self-care, right? Only you know best that you're reaching a limit, and I'd say 70-80% rule is good. And for instance, with eating, like, do you always eat until you're like, oh, can't walk? Or do you have a good principle, like, I'm going to stop now, right? And stopping and quitting, right, is not a cultural value, right? So we keep pushing it to 110. And so, there's all sorts of side effects like that, right? With so many issues we don't have to get into. So modulation, let's say, modulation as self-care, um, when training for longevity, is predicated on interoception. interoception, I'll define a little bit how I practice it. Like in this whole conversation, I've been trying to pay attention to my breathing, even my heart rate and my posture. Like even though I'm sitting like this, I feel like, okay, my neck is relaxed and aligned. My head isn't falling to one side. My shoulder, my trapezius is relaxed, right? My sternum is aligned, you know, and my weight is going down into my hips into this chair. Right? And so I'm checking my state of being in this relatively, you know, kind of low intensity situation. So I kind of apply 80-20 rule in the sense that I try to monitor myself with my interoception at least 20%, even when I'm 80% engaged out there. Of course, when I'm doing a lot of internal practice, right? Say I'm doing a form, right? Solo form, maybe it's 50%, really feeling my bones, right? Feeling even my connective tissue, right? Noticing if there's any tension, noticing if I'm straining like my foot or ankle, etc. Right? So this is a very high level way of concentrating and training. Everyone can get there. So again, cultural, like we want to show off, right? We want to have these quick gains so we can share it on social media, right? Again, that's all good motivation. But what are you sacrificing? Are you sacrificing your health, your longevity for that, you know, that video clip, right? And so again, subculture, like when I teach, not that I haven't overtrained in the past, I have, right? Hurt myself. And that's normal. In that case, do you keep pushing through it, right? Some people they sprain their ankle and they're like, oh, I gotta, right? And like, don't be a wuss, right? And just keep training through it. Okay, there's some valor to that, but at what cost, right? And so maybe from my background in Chinese medicine and acupuncture, where we honor the biological intelligence of the human mind, you know, heart, body, and what we're trying to do is trying to enhance that and trying to boost that. Much of which nowadays in many of my clients is just rest, right? And not just physical rest, that's already hard enough, but mental rest, right? Emotional rest. And then the body mind is like, thank you. Thank you, boss, you know, like, and then you can heal. And so opposite of that is overtraining. Opposite of self-care is self-neglect, where you don't pay attention to yourself and you're just kind of seeking external validation. And so again, it's cultural. And so if martial culture as a subculture, at least in what I resonate with, I think it's important to instill, internalize, incorporate, and enact and embody these values. And overtraining, yes, is really, really problematic long term. And why do you overtrain, right? Besides culture, again, it's often proving yourself, right? And so again, if we get to this idea of like a warrior versus a fighter, I think a warrior has nothing to prove. They know how powerful they are, right? Whereas a fighter, just the word fight, right? Like they want to fight or flight, right? And you choose to fight, which is good, perhaps better than like, you know, just collapsing. But fight is very energy intensive. And so if you have this idea, you know, I'm a fighter, you know, I want to fight the world, I want to fight you, you know, I want to fight the man, you know, I want to fight whatever, you know, everything, fight the virus, right? Fight the injustice, you know, it's okay. And I say really blessings and good luck. Thank you for fighting the good fight. But are you forgetting yourself? Are you forgetting, you know, rest and recovery and relaxation and recuperation? Are you caring so much about something out there that you neglect something in here? And again, it's fine. Like, you know, there's beautiful stories of those who sacrifice and martyr, you know. But again, maybe it's just me. I speak for myself, and I think we're on a similar page. That longevity, let's just use that value. Yeah, like because I love it so much, right? And that's like in the name Wing Chun. That because I love it, I don't want to prematurely truncate my health span such that, you know, I want to, let's say I get to 90 or 120, like ideally, let's say maybe a vision, I want to train until you know, I fall into my grave. Right? It would suck if I couldn't train for the last 20 years of my life for whatever reason because I overtrained. I'm like, you know, and something that gave me so much energy and passion, right? Then I would have to find a substitute or just kind of lament about the or be nostalgic about the like golden years, right? Good old days. So modulation is very good. Like feel, again, not as a theory. I mean, you can write it out as a plan, like, okay, 10 reps of this exercise, and then program in rest. Okay, 5-minute rest, and then, three sets of this exercise, and you can program, and then you feel your body like, oh wow, like I'm really sore the next 3 days. Okay. Maybe you overtrained, or you're like, no, pain is weakness leaving the body. You got to beat it out, right? And that's cool. But there's so many, psychoneural, endocrino, immunological effects, and even psychological effects of that kind of algorithm, that kind of operating system that we kind of impose on the body as a representative of nature, right? Like I'm like the clouds, I'm like the hydrological cycle, I'm like the earth, right? Our bodies are nature. And so again, it's cultural. Like, modern culture has kind of tried to control nature and force it and like extract from it and maximize, productivity, right? And so we treat ourselves like that too. So this is kind of, a greater context. But again, this is why I think martial practice can be healing, can help a lot of people, in their identity. And you mentioned like manhood or womanhood. Yeah, what does it mean to be a human being, on the planet in 2022, right? And what kind of wisdom can the martial path offer us to kind of reawaken, I think, some of the primal possibilities within us that modern culture has kind of amputated.
Let's just dive a little bit deeper. You did mention the name or the meaning of Wing
Mm,
Chun.
yeah.
And can you just, I guess, to close us out, go into the meaning of it and how it would transfer to other areas of life, like let's say a fitness activities, strength training, what are aspects of Wing Chun that you can bring into that might help improve?
Yeah.
Maybe another sport like soccer,
Yeah.
something like that, or
Mm,
just regular everyday activity,
yeah.
maybe doing better on your job.
This is a great question. And sometimes, for martial artists of a particular style, they kind of get stuck in the nitty-gritty details of technique, like the hand should be like this, the wrist should be like that. And that's all great. I can geek out with the best of them. Um, and that's all beautiful, right? Depending on which of the 5 A's, right? I respect other people's, autonomous choice about what their values are, and then if they come into conflict, then we can talk about that or duke it out. And so this greater context, like it kind of already contextualizes this cultural thing. So there's this word meme, which is coined by Richard Dawkins in the book Selfish Gene, I think published first edition 1978. So we all know genes, which are like units of biological information that are transmitted, right, via our biology, from grandparents to the child, the grandchild, and those unravel over the generations, right? And so the meme is a similar kind of dynamic, but it's not via our chromosomes. It's via words and videos like this, and songs, right, and stories and myths. And so I think without realizing it, like I already mentioned, a lot of modern people, they've internalized the machine mind. And this is actually, I'm quoting from Zhuangzi, which is an ancient Chinese philosopher from 2,000 years ago. Qi Xing, he mentioned the machine mind. And notice, right, we live in a very technological, even technocratic society. And I think it's really causing a lot of issues, right? I don't have to name all the statistics about like suicide and, like professional dissatisfaction, et cetera, right? How it affects our, again, culture, kind of honing in at that level. So the personal affects the social, and the cultural affects the biological, right? So stress from culture affects our body, our nervous system, fight or flight. Most people don't know how to release that fight or flight tension and energy. And so they burn out. That's the most common kind of category, burnout. And that shows up in many different symptoms depending on where you're weakest, right? Back pain, migraine, insomnia, digestive issues. So again, martial healing, let's just use that frame. Why train, right? To kick ass? Okay, great. Because your girlfriend asks you to, or the instructor is cute, all good. But what if, the instructor is replaced? And what if you break up with your partner? Then do you quit training? Hopefully during this time, in the interim, you've developed deeper reasons, deeper values. And like you said, I really like this, is that maybe you never train martial arts. You never encounter any of the martial A's. That's fine too, for whatever reason, right? It could be financial, it could be your uh, maybe you have an injury or something like that, or a handicap that prevents you from actually physically training martial arts. And yeah, that's just the reality of it. However, you can still benefit from the martial path. And I'll just use the meme of Wing Chun, and you'll read books. There's different books, and again, it's a meme that was inherited over the generations since, I don't know, Yip Man, or Bruce Lee, I think, was one of the first to use this word, Wing Chun, WingChun, and transmit it. He's one of the forefathers, if you will, of this meme. And I'm one of the inheritors, right? Indirectly. However, I want to mutate this meme. Genetic mutation. This is a mimetic mutation. I talked about the more fundamentalist, the more conservative, which I am. Like, I love tradition. However, I'm equally, if not 51%, 60% innovator. I can't help it. That's just my cultivation. Opens me up to a lot of creativity. So I want to edit this meme and offer something which I think is more profound and more global than the old myth of the name Wing Chun, which often is said, it was, this martial art was created by a Buddhist nun, and she trained somewhere, and it was called Wing Chun, whatever. Or she had a student who was being, accosted or assaulted, and she taught her Wing Chun. Well, the student's name, this lady's name was Wing Chun, right? And that's how it developed. So a lot of different myths, and that's all good. To me, like, a myth doesn't have to be objectively true for it to be beneficial, right? How does it affect the way you live? How does it affect your relationship with yourself? Does it cause you to overtrain and hurt yourself, right? Does it develop power in you, but you're kind of a jerk to other people? Some martial cultures do that, right? They kind of boost the ego, and like, it's all about the power. My Sifu can beat up your Sifu. So playground rules, right? And so Wing, to me, is the Cantonese pronunciation. My Mandarin is better, so Yong, 言字旁, the 永远的 Yong. So Wing, or Yong in Mandarin, is it means to praise, actually to eulogize, right? Something that of course was meaningful to you. So often it's like a poem in the context of like a funeral, right? You yong someone. So that's kind of interesting, like death, right? Interesting. So that's grief. I lost something, right? So Wing has this connotation of, even in death, even after you lose something like really deep, really that was sacred to you, very meaningful, you're in praise of it. He was a jolly good old fellow, or whatever. You sing the songs, you sing the praises of. Or it's even like in modern culture where you leave a review. Like, it's a mom and pop shop. This is like the best, like burrito ever. And so you write reviews like, you got to go to this taqueria, right? So that's also Wing. That's also praising. And what a way to live, right? In praise of that which inspires you. So it's very interesting kind of meme for martial art. Usually it's like the way of the fist, or the foot, or something like that. So it's kind of very poetic. And I've internalized this philosophy. I didn't realize it like the first 10 years, but more and more I thought about it and went deeper into integration and simplicity of the meaning of Wing Chun as it unfolds, even in the technique, of course, the forms, everything we talked about. But at its core, and part of my operating system has this algorithm of Wing Chun. I spoke about Wing. Chun, or Chun in Mandarin, is 春夏秋冬, the 4 seasons, the spring, right? So in this kind of seasonal cycle, which contextualizes life within a circle, right? Within a time, but not just birth and death, and then you have the short segment, okay? And you try to squeeze as much doing, therefore overtraining, right? Because you have this view of life as this point and this point, right? Oh, okay. So you have to get everything done, and it sucks, right? If you don't finish in time. So rather a seasonal cycle, right? Like birth is actually the beginning of death is the beginning of a rebirth, etc. And so that's very interesting. And that's, maybe it spirals, right? You have the circle, but it's moving forward, right? In space time. And so that is already kind of calming down if you can really internalize it. Like death is not the end in a way, right? There's something beyond. And we all have gone through death and rebirth in many ways, lost a job, lost a relationship, illness. And so spring is in the name of this martial path. Why not summer, right? Why not fall? Why not winter? It's because often we think of spring as the rebirth, right? It's the new life coming after a cold, dead, dark winter. It's like new hope, right? It's actually, in short, life, right? In terms of the sprouting of new life. And if that's spring, then summer is the flower, right? But that's the peak, right? After the peak, you're going down, right? Fruit, fall, right? Literally leaves falling, maybe skin falling. And then you have winter, right? Which is the seed, back to hibernation, stillness, rest, right? Which is lacking, right? Kind of avoid that. And so Wing Chun is kind of positioned at that threshold between death and birth, death and rebirth. So what a philosophy, like, so how does that affect then this? So Wing Chun, right? You praise that which you love, Wing, and Chun is the season of life. So in short, if you take the main words, love life. And so when you're training martial arts, what I've seen in the terms of the alchemy is like, if your life is crappy, like it's like not worth defending, right? just take me. I'm done, like whatever. Yeah. But if you really embody, absorb this philosophy, you realize, wow, if I'm training love life, I should try to make some changes to make my life more lovable, including self-love, right? So maybe you start to eat better. Maybe you sleep earlier, right? Maybe you try to cultivate better friendships. Maybe you change your job. I don't know, right? And wow, now I really love my life. Actually, I hated my life. I hated myself. Now, actually, I don't want to kill myself anymore, right? I mean, I don't say that jokingly, right? And some people they go to that point, right? So you talk about manhood, womanhood, etc., and how warriorhood, this way of cultivating and with this philosophy via Wing Chun, can actually be healing again. Wow, I have something to live for, even something to fight for, right? Something to die for, even. Um, and so you put that back into the training, like wow, with new vitality, right? And you hit a little bit harder with better technique and focus, right? More connection, right? And you're more consistent with your training because this energy has awakened in you, this life energy, and it's like praising, right? You love it, right? And so let's take that into this idea of spring into like you have a job, right? Or you have a relationship, right? One of the most common things for burnout, um, stuckness, stagnation is like you lack the new novelty, creativity, like one of the things we touched on before, right? And so you feel stuck, right? And you're like in a rut, right? Your relationship doesn't evolve. It's still, you tired of each other, right? But maybe you can take this idea of love life and rebirth, like, hey, maybe instead of watching TV, on Friday, let's go for a hike. Okay. Like that. Oh, let's connect to nature, literally, right? And wow, maybe that creates a shift, an opportunity to like unplug from the matrix and just talk to each other. Or at your job, like maybe you're still in the job that you don't, it's kind of boring, you're not really growing, but you tie into that Wing Chun energy, that feeling of love, like I care, I'm that passion, and then that can lead to like a rebirth of new ideas, right? And then you do something different, right, with the protocol, and maybe you're even awarded for it, like wow, that's so great that you came up with that. So yeah, these are all just like memes and theories that you can read in a book. But what's great about having a martial path, and again, we speak from a certain context that can reawaken that, it's not just a theory. It's something you experience. It's something that you feel. And when it really ignites within you, I think it's inevitable, almost impossible that that energy doesn't propagate out into your relationships, others, and also your job, etc. Even ultimately to the world. Like, so again, not to make it too like, mm, like whatever you want to call it, like too idealistic, but we have all heard that change begins with ourselves, right? Be the change that you want to see in the world, right? Mahatma Gandhi said that. So many masters have said that, and um, so I just want to resonate with this context, and want to encourage, if someone is listening, that do your Wing Chun workout, with Seeing Aaron, or find a school around you, right, and check it out. That's the only thing we can do, is go out there, see what's out there, and see if it resonates. Yeah, and so hopefully today it gave you some, this interview gave you some criteria and some variables to be able to make a good choice and set forth on the warrior Tao or the warrior path.
Wow, that was a great interpretation of. I never thought about it that way. I'm sure some of the viewers will appreciate that. So thank you. That's great.
You're welcome.
Before we go, is there any final thoughts, anything you want to plug? Where can people find you? They want to contact you about Wing Chun or anything that you're involved with?
Yeah, I'm just grateful to all my teachers, to be an example for this path, and allowed me also to develop my own energy, my own field martial kind of expression. And I want to thank you for this opportunity to speak in this context. I think we went in a very deep and broad way, but also some specific points. So I feel that this was a very valuable kind of container that we've filled with much relevant and useful content. That's my bias. So this martial path that I've referred to, I would say is like 1/3 of my interest and my cultivation. I also am, maybe I forgot if I mentioned, I didn't. I'm also a practitioner of medical path, mainly via the acupuncture tradition. So if people are interested in not just the martial self-protection, right, but also the medical self-healing principles and practice, I also offer that. And then the third is like the third M, right? I like a lot of alliteration, is actually mystical. That I use that sometimes hesitatingly. Sometimes I use the word mindful, but to me, mystical is just like what is out there. Like even in physics, like only 4% of that which we can measure and see is what makes up the universe, right? The 96% is dark energy and dark matter, right? So I acknowledge that when I also, share and transmit like that mystery, which can also have some of the answers that we're looking for. So the main website I use is Tao, which in Chinese just means your story, your mastery, your myth, some of the things we talked about, right? Tao center, finding and keeping your center, and not letting the whims of the world, like, throw you down. Maybe, yeah, but you're able to recenter, enter back into your center. So I have the website Tao Center with a D, DAOCNTR.com. And also recently I started a podcast, also Taology, DAOLOGY .substack.com, or you can just Google it. Substack is a new platform that a lot of artists and writers use. So that will be a way to contact me. But if this is the first and last time you've kind of connected in this way, I thank you for the time and your attention, because there's so much in the world nowadays that you can direct that to. And so thank you for sharing this I don't know how long it's been, hour or so almost, of synergy.
Again, thank you, Sifu Paul, for your time and for sharing your Wing Chun wisdom. And If people want to look up the training programs that we have, it's wingchunworkout.com. Hopefully, maybe we can do another one in the future, another discussion. We'll see. But yeah, thank you, and have a good one.